so glad that you're here joining us today for the Authors Chat. My name is Dr. Carrie Cisna. I am the Chief Academic Officer doing research, and I am going to introduce our authors, Dr. Lola Gershfeld, who is the founder and CEO of EMC Leaders, and Ramin Sedehi, who is our Chief Strategy Officer at EMC Leaders. So Lola, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I think just you being here is a huge gift to us and everybody who is here. So maybe before we start talking about our book, we can just ask you to turn to each other and say, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you. That was so cool.
Thank you. That was great.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started and just kind of dig into why you both wrote this book. So Lola, in your opening thoughts, you say, it is my expectation that this book will inspire the leader in you to appreciate the importance of being emotionally connected with all whom you work with and to engage everyone in building and fostering communities of trust, capable of achieving great outcomes. In these settings, people grow, thrive, and blossom. So we all know people are really disconnected right now, disengaged. We know there's a lot of conflict in the workplace that keeps people disengaged. But we've kind of been socialized to leave our emotions at home, and we don't really like talking about our emotions. So why on earth would you write a book about emotions, Lola?
Oh, well, thank you, Carrie. And so this book I wrote is to really three things. Number one is to really recognize the power of attachment. John Bowlby, who's the father of attachment theory, said that we need each other and we need attachment from cradle to the grave. We don't stop needing people at age 12. Number one. The second thing is the power of emotions. We need to make friends with emotions. We need to learn how to recognize emotions, how to articulate emotions, how to respond to emotions. And the third thing I think that the goal was of the book is the power of emotional connection. When we are connected on an emotional deeper level, we create relationships where we can thrive. We can take risks. We become more courageous with each other. So emotional connection is really the new normal for, I think, for the 21st century of leadership.
One of the features that I often found missing in the conversations about leadership, especially in management schools, is that it is often a skill-based conversation or a training-based conversation, but rather it isn't. Leadership isn't any of those aspects. It's very much of a state of being, of a way of thinking about others, as a way of putting yourself in front of others at the moment where you're called upon. And the question that I often asked myself was, what is it that made someone at that moment in time, whoever was the individual that we were studying, put themselves in that situation? What were present? What was in the soup that made it possible for that person to play their leadership role? In conversations with Lola and learning more about the work that she was doing, I began to see that the emotional connection, or said in a much more simpler way, the emotional safety that individuals can feel with each other gives that opportunity for courage to come out, for that opportunity for courage to actually play the role that it is meant to play at that moment. And that is how we began our partnership working on this book. And the book is really a combination of both a attachment theory buildup as well as a leadership focus that allows everyone to understand how to play their leadership moment. This is one of the major concepts that we try to get across in the book, is that leadership is not the same as management. Yes, people who have management titles have an opportunity to exercise leadership. They have that. In fact, when they exercise leadership, they impact a lot of people. But the reality is that every person, all of you here are both individuals within your organizations, leaders and managers in your organization, but also you're training the next generation of leaders. Many of you, especially when we were talking to you earlier, are looking at leadership development programs. And the challenge often is a leadership development program something where you just sort of go to it, you learn a bunch of things, and all of a sudden you're a leader? Or is it that leaders in the organization are going through a leadership development program that allows them to then be more effective in playing their their role. So that's part of what I think puts this book aside from others, is that it really is both a how-to book. There's a great deal of how-to, but there's also something we don't do enough of, which is that there's a lot of what if. There's a lot of what if we behaved in this way? What if we worked together in this way? What if our leaders were, as Lola was just saying, the 21st century leader? What if the leader, Brian Chesky of Airbnb is a great example, who basically says, I'm dealing with a lot of stress, I'm also stressed, I need help from you, the leadership team. During moments of stress and uncertainty, I'm acting on principle rather than business models, and so on and so forth. So that's part of what this is, and we hope to have a conversation with you and as we go along.
We've heard so much about emotional intelligence. Raise your hand if you've heard about emotional intelligence for a few decades now. Raise your hand if you've taught something on emotional intelligence with your teams. So, Lola, what is the difference between emotional intelligence and what you're talking about with the emotional connections? And what is the connection between those two things?
So I think emotional connection goes beyond emotional intelligence. Yes, emotional intelligence takes care of our balance, our awareness, our self-management. Emotional connection recognizes the impact we have on each other. It recognizes to see on your face, oh, I saw something. Can we hold on? Can we pause for a little? Because I noticed something. You're telling me one thing, but your face shows something different. So becoming more aware and also having the language of how to have this bonding conversation that we call in the EMC process, having this bonding conversation where we can be open and responsive to each other. One of the things that we know from science is that our brain is asked this $1 million question. And this $1 million question is, are you there for me? And I will take ARE as an acronym for, are you accessible to me? Are you emotionally accessible to me? Will you open up when it's difficult moment? Will you be open to me so I can understand what's happening for you? Are you responsive to me? Will you be able to respond to my emotional need? Even if you're stressed, can you hold that space and then be responsive to my needs? Are you emotionally engaged with me? Yes, you don't agree with me, but can you still be engaged in a conversation to really hear my point? And what we are learning from science, what we're really starting to understand, is until you learn about emotional understanding and how to articulate it and slowing things down, then you cannot really do that. You cannot be ARE. That's what we teach in our book, is how to be ARE with your team, with each other. Because you are so incredibly important to each other. You so incredibly need each other in moments of stress and in moments of vulnerability. Even in happy moments. You don't have to have disconnection or disengagement happening on your team. Even to go to the next level, you need each other to create that nurturance. One of the things that I think Darwin said is that survival goes to the most nurtured, not the most fittest. No, he never said that. He said to the most nurtured. And we need to learn how to nurture that connection with each other to create the sense of safety and sense of a place where we can fly, we can thrive. And I see this all the time when we work with people. It's incredible. It's really a transformational moment.
Awesome. Yeah, I teach emotional intelligence in a business school. I teach at the university level. And I've always wondered, what is the how-to to actually do it? And so this book really helped me. And Ramin, would you add anything to that with the difference between emotional intelligence and emotional connections?
How many people have been through an emotional intelligence training program where you actually were in the program? The challenge that at least I faced when I first went through my first program was something that nobody talked about. They told me all about emotional intelligence and so on and so forth, and maybe I felt like I already had some of that as part of who I was and how I had come through organizations and what have you, and some new things. But what I never learned was how to respond to someone who actually comes to you with an emotional state. That was one of the first things I learned in working with Lola, was how to respond to someone who tells you of their emotion. We actually don't have that training oftentimes that allows us to connect with that individual. We often feel that if it's someone who works for us as a subordinate, if we acknowledge their feelings, we are agreeing. And that is one of the critical components, is that it's not an agreement, it's but rather a acknowledgement that someone is feeling a certain way. Is an acknowledgement of framing that in the context that that's normal. And these were critical components. I think one of the other factors for me has been this notion of reprogramming, and I want to talk about that a little bit. And we have that in this book. We are programmed to respond to content, all of us, especially if we've been to school, especially if we've got one of those things called an MBA or something close to it. I taught MBA students for decades, and one of the worst things we teach them is the fact that they learn to believe that they have an answer to everything, and that it's all about content, is analysis, is breaking it down, understanding all the components. And one of the challenges that we talk about in our book is that most disconnections, or conversely put, most strong connections are not occurring around content. They're occurring around emotions. You all have been in a conversation with someone whom you may have had a conversation with many times. They have listened to you before, you have listened to them, you have met, you've worked with each other, you know all that there is about what they know, and they know about what you know. But all of a sudden a conversation goes bad. It changes direction. It completely goes off rails. It's got nothing to do with content. It has to do with the emotions that were displayed at that moment. So that was one of the reprogramming that I believe will help us understand how to put emotional intelligence into work. Because emotional intelligence is really the appreciation of knowing when to turn off the content and turn on the connection. Because once you have a connection, you might still disagree on the content, but the emotions in the room have completely changed. You are now on a different space because that individual knows you're there for them. Even though you disagree, but they know that you're there for them. And you are, and they are there for you, and that changes the content. So that's one of the major factors in way I see the work that we have had the great fun of putting together and introducing to folks. And it's a small book, it's not going to take a lot of your time to read, but we believe that there's a tremendous amount of value in this reprogramming.
Awesome. Raise your hand if you feel like the majority of your job is managing other people's emotions, helping them manage their emotions. Yeah, that's great. And so Ramin, in the book, you say the EMC strategy teaches individuals that disconnections are inevitable, but the time we spend in cycles of negative thought and action is entirely controllable to us. So think about the amount of time and energy that is wasted on people just ruminating on this programming, like Ramin is saying. So what are some of the other takeaways that we will walk away if we read this book, Lola?
I think one of the great takeaways is we all want to feel happy. We want to feel accomplished. And we struggle when we disconnect from our team members, from our bosses, from our peers. It's hard. We can't create. I remember sitting in my office with my head down, trying to figure out, I know how to do this, but my brain is not working. And we do not put those two things together. We can't recognize performance to connection. We don't see that as linked. And I think one of the takeaways is that it is a clear link. When we feel in love, we can change the world. When we feel connected at work, we can resolve anything. This is one of the things I hear over and over again when I work with a team who is maybe not thriving yet, and we take the session and go through the emotions and just people sharing in a safe environment and understand each other much better. Last year has been a really difficult year for everybody with COVID and being isolated from each other. And those organizations who have integrated the EMC into their culture, they said, We thrived, even in the moments of darkness. We could lean on each other. We knew that even physically we're not together, emotionally we are together. And we were able to accomplish such amazing milestones that we never even imagined we could do that. This is the key takeaway, that collectively we do great things much more than individually we can do. And when we are connected, we can actually accomplish.
So I want to pick up on the concept of thriving, which is something that we spend a great deal of energy talking about in the book. It's something that we take for granted. We think we are thriving, but oftentimes we're just simply surviving, moving forward. There's a lot of teams that perhaps don't even know what the definition really means, what it entails, how it is different than doing well. Doing well is one state of being. Thriving is a very different state of being. Perhaps if I can ask you to do a little exercise for yourselves, if you could maybe just close your eyes for a minute and think of a situation where you felt you were really thriving at work, professionally. And if you don't have a professional example, a personal one is fine. And collect your feelings if you can. What were you feeling during those moments? What were your feelings about yourself, and what were your feelings about the other people on the team, about your boss, perhaps whoever was in charge of that group, and just collect those feelings. Okay. Anyone like to say what they were feeling during those moments? Confident. Confident. Anything else? Yes?
Energized.
Energized. Accomplished. That's great. You felt accomplished at that moment. You knew what you were doing, and did you feel the same about other people in your group in that moment? Yes. So it's these moments. It's like everything comes together. What other feelings?
Inspired.
Inspired. Excellent. Excellent. Others? What do we have over here?
Elevated.
Elevated. Needed. Needed. That's interesting. So at that moment you felt like you were part of a kind of a connected piece, so that you were part of that piece. So these feelings of thriving, they are difficult to achieve on a consistent basis. Would you agree? We get disconnected a lot, and I don't mean that in the emotional connection language. We get disconnected because just work interrupts us. It's actually very funny. Work interrupts your doing work, which is to grow, to develop, to be at your very best. All of you are development professionals, and your goal is to help individuals live up to their promise, to their abilities. But work interrupts that. The rules, regs, policies interrupt that. They create an environment where I recently talked to some people from a company at a very senior level, and they were talking about the fact that all this stuff is great, but there is one way to do what we do. So if you have kind of a one way to do what we do, it becomes really difficult for anyone to shine. Would you not agree? Part of it is that in our book, and really in many books that talk about emotional intelligence, or the total value of emotional intelligence, the total value of development, is creating environments where people can thrive, creating environments where thriving becomes not a once-in-a-while activity, but a regular activity. I'll try to give you an example of my own work. I once worked with a group of 9 other senior leaders who were all heads of different units of a major institution. Each unit, hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of staff and what have you. But what there was, because of the work we had put in for years, was that at times we were 9 individuals, each representing our areas, but at times we were 1. And when the financial crisis of 2008 hit, which completely decimated a number of our competitors, we actually came out thriving because we were already thriving. We were already understanding what our strength was and how we could rely on each other, how we could be needed, how we could be energized, how we could be inspired to do more than what we were doing. So part of our goal is to help organizations get comfortable with the concept of thriving as the main way to be, as opposed to be to a once in a while activity. So this is part of what I'm very excited about as a takeaway from this book.
I feel so encouraged that there's a movement back to human and to human flourishing and human thriving, wanting people to love their jobs and love their life. Another really important thing that I'm excited about is this priority of DEI work and the importance of diverse teams and the innovation and creativity that can come out of that if they feel included. So can you speak, does the book talk at all about diversity, equity, and inclusion and that role and emotional connections with that?
When attachment really talks about human needs, addressing, meeting human needs. And human needs really across anything, doesn't matter what religion, what background, what cultural diversity you come from, it's really addressing that human need. And we don't recognize the power of it, I think. And so it is exciting to see this and to provide people with this roadmap on how they can create a culture of meeting human needs. It's not about the certificate, it's not about the free lunches, or it's not about the massages that you get. It's really about how do I connect with you, how do I recognize your value and that you bring the importance of it. We get lost. Again, emotions are very powerful. Emotions are the most powerful thing in the room, but it's also the most powerful agent of change. We look at interactions as a dance. Emotion is the music of the dance. In order for you to dance with people and include everybody in the circle of dancing, you got to change the music, and that's what emotional connection is.
The challenge we all have and you all face is getting diverse people to A, come to your company, B, be part of a culture, C, bring their unique aspects to your culture and add to it. So that's a pretty tall order when individuals will walk into any work and not feel like they're part of a team, feel like they're not necessarily valued, they feel like they're not necessarily safe. And this is a challenge that doesn't matter how great your DEI program is, diversity isn't used. So part of the work that we are very excited about is the fact that through being connected at the emotional level, the safety is created so that diversity can actually do what it is that you wanted to do, which is to add to the culture. Inclusion only occurs when people are brought in to decision making, because inclusion is about inclusion into the decisions of the future of the organization. That is a critical component that occurs when the leaders have the emotional capacity to hear different thoughts. Our book is very much written from a servant leader perspective. Servant leader perspective is almost the exact opposite of what I've started to call over the years the John Wayne School of Management, which doesn't really exist, and nor does anyone really want to make it work. But unfortunately, too many people think that's how they're supposed to lead. The servant leadership is about inclusion at the very beginning. It says, you bring to me what I need. I remove obstacles in your path to do what it is. I hired you because of your diversity, so I want to hear your diverse thoughts. I don't want to hear everyone in my meeting saying yes. These are questions that are hard to do, and if one starts a meeting simply by saying, thank you for being here, really appreciate you being here, that changes the dynamic right there and then. As opposed to, yeah, of course, I called a meeting and you're here. But no, thank you for being here. That step, along with many other steps that we talk about in the book, creates that accessible individual that can then appreciate the DEI. So part of what we do is cultivate the ground that allows for DEI allows for your talent management effort, talent recruitment. Every dean, and I've been a dean for many years, every dean is in the recruitment business, right? Especially when you are at the top universities. Every single person you have is like a free agent on a football team. They are, every single year they're a free agent. I had 500 tenure track faculty. Somewhere around 140, 150 of them are on the market every single year. Not that because somebody else is recruiting them. Some at Penn, so Harvard, Yale, or Princeton are recruiting them. And I'm recruiting other people. The key is getting the talent there isn't enough. So we spent a lot of our energy getting a lot of very good people, but then they left in a couple of years. And our question was, why do they leave in a couple of years? Well, what we learned after we studied the individuals and their backgrounds is that we were not creating the environment that was welcoming for these people who were coming from a different type of an institution. So by creating that, we changed our dynamics. So one of my performance KPIs as that goes to a bonus is am I plus or am I minus? Have I gotten more people or have I lost people to other institutions? So of course we had to figure out how to create environments that allow individuals of diverse backgrounds to feel safe and to be involved and included in a culture that's 350 years old at the institution I was at. So these are old cultures, old ways of doing things, but part of it was to create that environment. And I will tell you that we didn't do it everywhere, but it was a start, and it keeps going on decades after I have left the institution. So it's part of what you all can do a lot more of, is creating that combination between your DEI efforts and the environment that can then cultivate that effort that you had put in. The environment between all the development efforts and an environment that allows that to be cultivated and grown. And that's what this book, I believe, gives you both the how-to and some amount of what-if, so that you can be inspired by that.
Yeah, you guys both keep using the word safety, and I don't know about all you guys, but I keep hearing this buzzword, psychological safety in the workplace, right? This is a new term that I've been looking into. So is the book, could you explain, or do the emotions help us with psychological safety? You talked about that, but is there anything you want to add?
Psychological safety is very important. It's hard to create though, psychological safety in a team session where people can express their ideas without negative consequences. That's the definition. Can you be in a room and sharing opinions and thoughts without negative consequences? And it comes back to emotions again, because if somebody says something and somebody gets triggered, and boom, the emotions take over, and now we are in a disconnection, we are in a pattern that gets dancing us in a different directions. So I think, again, coming back to learning the language of emotions, learning the triggers of each other's, learning the raw spots, learning how to speak that language where we can share our fears and our needs, and without feeling weak, without feeling inadequate, without feeling shamed about it. And it's deprogramming a lot of what Ramin said, and also experiencing. This is an experiential process. We know and we experience ourselves from our work that people don't just change by telling them how to do things. They have to experience things. That is what we do. We take people through that process. We also teach you how to do the process. We teach you how to empower your people. So I really hope that people see that you don't have to be stuck. You don't have to be stuck. You can make change. You can create change. You don't have to be the CEO to create change. Yes, it's harder. Of course it's harder. But you, each one of you, can make that change within yourself and others by creating that emotional responsiveness. John Bowlby said emotional responsiveness is what creates safety, trust, and emotional connection. So by learning the language of emotions, by creating that responsiveness with each other, you start to change the music and people start to dance differently.
I think psychological safety is one of those words that used a lot, but I don't believe everybody really gets exactly what it means. And I think what it really means is an environment where a group of people can work together without negative consequences, and their work is meaningful and is decisive. If it's just simply people working together but nobody really pays attention to what they said or what they did, it doesn't really matter. But psychological safety, I think, needs several other components in addition to what Lola said. I think one is the clarity. So clarity from management. If a group of people is there to support a decision that someone has made or someone will make, that group is not really safe to discuss and throw out ideas and work through a variety of different things because the decision has already been made. So I think it's important to be clear. So as a leader, it's important to say, I have made a decision and I'd like all of you to support it. There's another way to say, I will make the decision and I would like your thoughts so that we can shape how it's done. And then there's the third way, which is where I believe a lot more work could be done in our organizations, which is we're going to make this decision together. We're going to think about this together. And when we have something that makes it possible to go forward, that's when we'll go forward. So this third group requires something a little different, which is the second part of psychological safety, which is that expertise has to play a smaller role. Many of you probably put together teams to deal with problems. We call them task forces or what have you. And in many of our teams, I will bet you that you'll put heads of departments or experts in an area. Well, the minute that the group is heavily laden by experts, there goes the idea of discussing ideas freely, because someone is an expert. Someone is from the finance department, or someone is from the purchasing department, or someone is the head of this department, where you have 3 heads of departments. So part of gaining psychological safety is about the emotional safety that individuals feel. But using psychological safety to drive your organization forward involves a careful selection of teams. This is something that requires a lot more work than we give it. Selection of individuals who are problem solvers, individuals who are achievement oriented and motivated, people who are going to be your future leaders. So how many of you do succession planning here? Or think about succession planning, right? Okay, great. Well, teams are your perfect place, but you can't put someone in a team and then have the head of some department or an expert there and expect that that individual is going to shine, because that expert will stifle all of the other activity. The head of the department, their number one job is to protect themselves, unless you have created a long-term sense of what I described to you, the 9 group of leaders that we were together. That had been in the work for years before we were able to work as one. So psychological safety, I think, is very important for the future of our workspace. It's critical to DEI, absolutely critical. Without psychologically safe teams, DEI doesn't really work. It's just people who are there. I remember many years ago, I was decades ago when I became a U.S. citizen. I was sitting in a front row, like you are, and next to a gentleman an African gentleman, very tall guy, very funny laugh, very strong voice. And they came around and they asked us to come to this stage. And they had the big flag, and I held the lower end, and being my height, and he held the upper end, being his height. And he says to me, "Why do you think they chose us?" And he said, "Well, height and color." So we don't want that for our diversity initiatives. We want inclusion. We want people to feel though they are there to change the culture and move the organization forward. So I think that's the true value of psychological safety when we get there.
Does anyone in the audience have a question?
We love to take questions.
There's a question in the back.
Me, I've agreed with everything you've said. What I think we need to do is look at the metrics. How do we know we're successful at doing exactly what you're trying to educate folks on, which I love, let's have them lead. Why aren't we seeing more diverse people in areas of leadership, like having so many women, and this is a great group right here. So I'm looking like, let's move the needle and make it happen. Do you agree? Did I totally miss the mark?
Yeah, so is your question, will we really ever have psychological safety if people don't look into leadership roles and see themselves, people that look like them?
My question is that how you measure success of psychological safety, is when you see it in action?
Well, I think you have a very, very good point, and is exactly where we need to go. However, I think if we were to measure success only by those measures, we would be very disappointed.
Yes.
Because it takes a long time to make those changes. I think there are a lot of steps that all of us here can play, because you guys are in a crucial place. I know you have to follow a lot of rules, and I know you're put into a situation where you're enforcing the organization's rules and regs on your HR side. But on your development side is being able to create opportunities. So this is how we're going to get there, is to create opportunities where individuals of diverse backgrounds who are leaders, in the sense that they display leadership qualities, they put themselves in the front, they have a state of mind that thinks of others before themselves. For those individuals to play their part. If we can do enough of that, those individuals will move up, because they will also be successful in delivering products, whatever it is that the company does, because it will just be done better. It will be done faster, cheaper, whatever is the goal. But we all know that many of our organizations actually want to do more than that. They want to make an impact in people's lives. So that would be our measure. Our measure is how many of our teams have the environment where people feel as though they can say anything. So that's a great question to ask, right? Do I feel like, we all do surveys of our companies, we do the various Gallup and other surveys. What do you do with the result? Do you actually go and figure out why is it that people don't feel like they can say what they want to say, or what they believe is true? Or that this is the way to do it, or that we're going down the wrong.
I mean, many organizations fire the diverse applicants once they start acting individual. You shared that earlier. So I think that's a great point.
Exactly. I think the key is creating those teams. Other questions?
I want to add one more thing, that I think when you bring that topic to the leadership team, you got to create safety for them as well. If we come across as demanding or judgmental, they're going to put up a wall, and guess what? Nothing's going to happen. So we have to be emotionally balanced, emotionally accessible, responsive, and engaged, saying, yes, of course, it matters to you. First thing is obviously to create that psychological safety and emotional safety for the leadership to even start the conversation, so they can share their fears, they can share their vulnerability with you. So you have to be creating that safe space for them.
Is there another question? Yeah.
Then we discovered a switch how neurotype thinkers integrate into this theory.
We discovered how neurodivergent thinkers integrate into this theory.
I think one of the major factors that Lola mentioned is that at the base level, we really are all very much the same. Our emotions are exactly the same. How we react to something, of course, depends on our environment, depends on our upbringing, depends on the various childhood issues and challenges we may have faced. Some people are more resilient than others. The work that Marty Seligman, for example, at 10 had done, and Angela Duckworth was talking about this morning, it looks at the fact that resilience, for example, is a bell curve. Everyone has some have a lot more of it, and everyone else kind of falls in the middle. However, if we're able to connect at the emotion level, if we're able to find out what is motivating that person to act in a certain way, why are their automatic reactions a certain way? We talk about these in the book, your automatic reactions. So when something happens, we automatically react. This is our amygdala reacts, so our kind of primitive brain reacts. And the primitive brain is actually almost identical for all of us. Our new cortex, which is where our logic comes from, now that's different. That's kind of the advanced version of the Homo sapiens sapien, if you will, as opposed to our cousins. The question that we try to do is to focus on individuals and their basic emotions. So the base level is either fear, sadness, surprise, or shame that exist. Now, I might feel fear and you might feel shame in the same exact situation, same exact event that we just saw. That is two different ways of thinking, but at least we know we're at the base level. So now we're going to explain, we're going to explore that, we're going to try to figure out where that came from. And what do I need to say to you to make you feel better? What do you need to say to me to make me feel better and to feel as though I can move forward? I hope that was a bit of a response to your very good question.
We are here to continue the conversation. We love the work. We're very passionate about our work. We see the impact it has on people, and we want to share it with you.